It was a usual night for me as my husband headed off to his night shift at the hospital. As he left, I prepared myself for the house chores, turning on the Scary Story podcast on my Xbox to keep me company. My two playful cats, Xena and Marcel, accompanied me in the dimly lit apartment. Everything seemed ordinary until my eldest cat, Xena, suddenly froze and hissed under the door separating our apartment from the shared bubble with our neighbor, the building manager. This behavior was entirely out of character for her, which sparked my curiosity and concern. Listening to a particularly chilling story about home invaders, I couldn't shake off the feeling of insecurity. The podcast mentioned how intruders often scout their targets and study their schedules before breaking in, heightening my anxiety. I decided to turn down the volume and press my ear against the metal door, straining to hear any suspicious sounds from the other side. To my dismay, I could distinguish the heavy breathing of someone on the other side, reminiscent of someone who had been drinking heavily. Goosebumps covered my skin as I considered the possibility of a potential intruder. Fearing the worst, I searched for something to defend myself with in case the intruder managed to break through the metal door. I clutched my husband's baseball bat tightly, ensuring I was ready to protect myself and my two beloved feline companions. In a moment of panic, I hid my cats under the sink cupboard, thinking I needed to keep them safe as if they were my own children. As I returned to the door, I decided to glance through the peephole. What I saw on the other side left me paralyzed with fear, a horrifying, bloodshot eye staring right back at me, as if peering into my very soul. The intruder seemed to know I was watching, and his breathing intensified as he frantically attempted to gain entry, fiddling with the doorknob and keyhole. Feeling the weight of the baseball bat in my hands, I prepared myself to defend my home and my pets. In a desperate move, I rushed to the living room and cranked up the volume on the podcast, hoping the sound of a man's deep voice would create the illusion of someone else's presence inside the apartment. Miraculously, my impromptu plan worked. The intruder stopped fiddling with the door, and the heavy breathing ceased. I returned to the door, peeping through the hole, only to find the unsettling eye was no longer there. However, my heart sank as I noticed that the metal outside door had been left wide open. At this point, my neighbor, a lonely elderly lady who also had two cats, finally woke up from the commotion and rushed into my apartment, startled by the loud podcast. I recounted the terrifying encounter to her, and she confirmed that she hadn't heard anything due to her habit of keeping the TV on to ward off loneliness. Together, we inspected the metal door and questioned whether we had mistakenly left it open. Even my husband, whom I called at work, assured me that he had double-checked and locked it before leaving. Reflecting on the night's events, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude towards the Scary Story narrator, whose eerie storytelling inadvertently saved me and my cats from a potentially dangerous situation. From that night on, I vowed to enhance our home security measures, grateful for the extra protection of the metal door that had served as a barrier against the intruder. I also decided to share my story with others, urging them to be vigilant and take precautions to ensure their safety, even in unexpected and spine-chilling situations. It was a chilling winter's night, and I found myself reminiscing about the past year when I was 26. My life had taken an unexpected turn after my mom's passing, leaving my dad and me to manage our properties together. Sadly, my dad lost his sight. However, he had sold a successful energy company years earlier, giving us stability financially. Our lives were intertwined with our properties and the responsibilities that came with them. As the snowflakes danced gracefully from the darkened sky, I remembered the times when we lived as a family in our cozy house. Now, my sister Katie and I resided there, while Dad lived in his one-story condo just 10 minutes away from us. The condo was situated near the village, offering him convenient access to grocery stores and necessities, which he could easily reach by foot. Amidst our daily routines, there came a winter storm that swept through our town, transforming the landscape into a glistening white wonderland. During this particular storm, Katie was away, visiting her boyfriend half an hour from home, leaving me alone in the house. As the snow piled up outside, concern washed over me, and I decided to check on Dad. I reached for the landline phone and called him, as that was his preferred mode of communication. However, he didn't answer, and I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling settling in my gut. Usually, he would rush to call back if he missed our call, but this time was different. After several attempts, I couldn't reach him, so I called Katie, hoping she might have some insight into his whereabouts. To my surprise, she knew nothing about Dad venturing out in such treacherous weather. Growing increasingly worried, I made my way through the treacherous snow-covered roads to his condo. The roads were eerily empty, the winter storm advisory warnings persistently alerting me on my phone. But I pushed forward, knowing my dad shouldn't be wandering in such extreme conditions. As I approached his condo, I noticed footprints in the snow leading both ways, suggesting he had recently been out. My heart sank, but just as I was about to knock on the door, the neighbor's kind elderly wife, Hannah Laura, opened her door, warmly greeting me. She informed me that her husband had given my dad a ride to the store a short while ago. Relieved, I thanked her and decided to wait inside Dad's condo until he returned. To my astonishment, I found the door unlocked, despite countless warnings to my dad about the importance of securing his home. I shook off the sense of urgency to find the key, instead letting myself in. A peculiar sight greeted me, a trail of melted snow leading from the living room to the hallway, which led to my dad's room. "Hey, Dad, it's me." I called out, expecting him to answer. But silence filled the air. He couldn't hear me, or so I thought. I called him again, and his phone vibrated from his bedroom. A flicker of hope emerged, but as I entered the room, I realized he wasn't there. His phone remained on the nightstand, seemingly abandoned. The trail of melted snow led into his bathroom, where the shower curtain was drawn shut, unlike his usual practice of leaving it open. A sinking feeling enveloped me, and I knew something wasn't right. He should have heard me and responded, but he didn't. Without hesitation, I called the police, my heart pounding in my chest. I waited anxiously at the entrance, the only point of entry or exit. The snowstorm seemed to amplify my fears as I contemplated what might be happening to my dad. In what felt like an eternity, the police arrived, and we cautiously entered the condo together. To my shock, there sat a man on my dad's bed, hands raised in surrender. It was as if he had been expecting us. My dad returned home shortly afterward, unaware of the dangerous situation that had unfolded. We learned that the intruder lived a few units away and had been watching my dad for some time, planning to rob him. This realization sent shivers down my spine, knowing how close we were to disaster. My dad, ever compassionate, hesitated to press charges, but we convinced him to hire a lawyer to ensure justice was served. And so, the man who sought to steal from my blind father was arrested and charged with third-degree burglary. It was a harrowing experience that taught us to be even more vigilant, cherishing the safety and security of our loved ones. That fateful winter's night, we reaffirmed the strength of our family bond and the courage it takes to protect one another from the darkness that can lurk so closely.
Back in 2017, when I was a 20-year-old mother, I found myself juggling the demands of caring for my newborn and dealing with the challenges of being a new parent. At the time, there were rumors circulating about people dressing up as clowns and causing mischief in various neighborhoods. While these stories captured the attention of many, I was so preoccupied with my own responsibilities and sleep deprivation that I brushed off such tales as mere distractions from my own pressing concerns. It was the heart of winter, and snow still covered the ground outside. As a result, I rarely had the opportunity to leave the house and get some fresh air. My daily outings were limited to taking out the trash, a task that required a short trip to the back of our house. The rest of my time was spent indoors, attending to the constant needs of my screaming newborn. One frosty morning as I stepped out to dispose of the garbage, I happened to glance to my right and noticed a set of footprints directly beneath the window of my baby's room. Curiosity piqued. I moved closer to investigate and was taken aback to find hand indentations on the window screen. It was an eerie discovery, but since my baby slept in my room, I wasn't immediately overcome with fear. Nevertheless, my boyfriend couldn't shake off his growing concern and became increasingly paranoid about our safety. A couple of days went by, and on a sleepless night I found myself wide awake around 3 a.m. As I sat there holding my baby and hoping for a moment of respite, I suddenly heard a spine-chilling sound, a screeching howl that echoed through the darkness. My initial thought was that it could be stray cats engaging in their nightly shenanigans, so I dismissed it as an ordinary occurrence and continued to console my little one. It wasn't until morning's light revealed peculiar footprints crisscrossing our yard that I began to question the source of those unsettling sounds. The footprints were perplexing. They seemed to suggest that someone had been moving back and forth between the houses adjacent to ours. Yet, given the presence of a drug house across the street, we had occasionally witnessed individuals trespassing through our yard to reach their destination. So, despite the oddity of the footprints, I reluctantly dismissed them, attributing them to the recurring nocturnal wanderings of those associated with the notorious drug den. Several nights passed, and I found myself awake once again at 3 a.m. This time, as I nursed my baby, a distinct sound caught my attention, a dragging noise against the side of our house. My heart raced as I turned my gaze toward the back door, which had a small window covered with blinds. The door didn't seal properly due to wood rot, making it easier for unwanted sounds to penetrate the silence of the night. In the dimly lit room, I could make out the silhouette of a looming figure standing just outside the back door, clutching a large kitchen knife. Fear coursed through my veins as I watched in horror as the intruder ran the blade of the knife across the window panes, creating an unsettling scratching noise. In a disconcerting turn of events, the figure then began softly knocking on the window, seemingly taunting me with their presence. In that moment I realized I had to act, but with my baby still latched onto me, I felt a wave of vulnerability and indecision wash over me. Desperate to keep the intruder in my line of sight, I made a quick decision. I carefully rose from the couch, readjusting my position so that I could maintain visual contact with the unsettling shadow figure. Taking a few determined steps, I entered the kitchen and flicked on the bright overhead light, casting a sudden burst of illumination into the darkness. With my heart pounding in my chest, I spoke, my voice surprisingly calm and composed. "Hey man, I've already called the police. I'm sure you don't want to deal with them. So why don't you go home?" The figure froze, clearly caught off guard by my unexpected intervention. They seemed to deliberate with themselves for a brief moment before making a swift decision. Without uttering a word, the intruder bolted toward the alleyway, disappearing into the night. Relief washed over me as I realized I had managed to defuse the situation without escalating it further. However, when I later recounted the incident to my boyfriend, he was understandably upset that I hadn't awakened him or promptly called the authorities. In hindsight, I understood his concerns, but in the heat of the moment, my sleep-deprived mind had led me to prioritize keeping the intruder within my sight and ensuring the safety of my child. From that day forward, I never experienced anything quite as unnerving again. The incident served as a chilling reminder of the vulnerability we sometimes face in our own homes, even during moments when we should feel the most secure. While I couldn't erase the memory of that night from my mind, I found solace in knowing that I had mustered the courage to confront the intruder and protect my family, even in the face of exhaustion and fear.